Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Banking Bills and Bevs. You're here with myself, Mr. Money Jar, Will from AppTap, and we're joined by special guest this week, Emma Kisby from Co2 and we're going to be talking about open banking and ethical living. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
Very good.
Yes, busy, as always.
Very good.
Why not just get straight into it? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Emma, and about Co2 and what you do at Co2?
Yeah, very good. So I come from a kind of customer data analytics. So basically it's using people's information, analysing how they shop. I worked with a couple of the big UK grocers and then kind of helping that to inform how businesses make decisions around how they might plan a store, for example, or do their marketing or offers they do. So I came from that background. I got a real passion for the opportunities you've got with kind of customer data. And I spent a bit of time working at Virgin and really getting a sense about how you put purpose at the heart of your business. And that really kind of led me down the path of being introduced to Co2, which kind of brought those two elements together. So using people's information to help them make better decisions about the way they spend rather than a business help them making decisions. But also around that true purpose. There is a serious issue, as we all know, with kind of climate and sustainable living. And I have two young children now who keep asking me around what we're doing to change the way we live. And I don't really have an answer. So I am a consumer who doesn't really know what they can do to make a difference to the climate. So Co2 really helped fix a personal problem for me, as well as fell very much in the sweet spot of kind of my previous career experience.
Okay, and that's Co2's like CO2 Goes. So it's focused primarily on climate change, or do you look at other areas of ethical living as well?
Yeah, both. So Co2 stands for Connecting Good, and it's all around connecting good, Co2. It's connecting consumers and businesses based on their shared values. So what Co2 does is it looks at the real-time impact of your spend, both on people and planet. So those two issues are so interrelated, you can't really look at one without the other. And so we look across a number of different kind of sustainable values. So we have around 12 sustainable values that users can choose. And it shows you then through linking your bank account, the impact of your spend based on things that you might care about, whether that's things like paying the living wage, whether you care about businesses who pay the real living wage, or whether that's your carbon emissions and the impact of your spend based on who you're spending with. So that's the really exciting opportunity where open banking has really opened up opportunities to inform users not only and consumers not only on kind of things like budgeting or mortgage choices, but also in terms of their impact on their spend on the planet.
Just a little bit off topic, but wondering if you're doing any work or aligning at all with the UN goals.
Yeah, so our 12 values that we choose, they're based on user testing, because one of the challenges we find are that users get quite confused or consumers get quite confused. There's so many things. So we tried to simplify it. We had thousands to start off with. We've narrowed it down, but we are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is really important. And what we effectively do is we pull together all the different accreditations like the Carbon Trust or the Living Wage Association or the Soil Association, and we pull them into these very simple 12 badges so that when users say, you know, we actually really care about vegan, for example, we say, yeah, that's great. Or I really care about businesses who are carbon conscious. Then we aggregate businesses who are generally accredited with the right credentials, and then we show users the impact of their spend against these businesses.
So as a user, can you kind of walk me through what that might look like? Do I download an app? I connect a bank account? What are my steps through that user journey?
Yeah, exactly. So you do exactly that. You download the app and then you are presented with 12 values. You can choose all of them or some of them, but to make it really simple, I'll say that I care about the living wage. I connect my bank account. I can choose one of my bank accounts. In my case, I have Lloyd's, but then I also have Revolut. So I can choose one or all of my bank accounts. And I can look then at my spend and then look in terms of the percentage of my spend that I have spent with living wage businesses. So when I signed up, when I first met Ben, our founder, and looked my living wage, the proportion of my spend on living wage businesses was at 1%, which was a fairly depressing, which then opened my eyes to quite how few businesses are actually accredited with paying the living wage, because it goes through everyone who works at their business. So it's challenging, but it's achievable. And I found out my local pub does pay the living wage versus other pubs. So it did encourage me to go to the pub pre-lockdown a lot more. I don't know if that's probably the outcome, but yeah.
So you then also working on the other side of that, trying to help businesses improve.
Exactly. So there are so many amazing businesses out there who are doing such fantastic things, and it's really driving awareness of that. And then also one of the challenges with kind of ethical living is that a lot of businesses will have these amazing initiatives or amazing purposes, but it's really difficult for them to understand the impact of that. So what we can do is help businesses understand that consumers do care about certain values, and then evolve their strategies and evolve initiatives in their business accordingly. So it's this kind of circular impact where it helps consumer understand the impact of their spend and make better decisions. We talk about conscious consumerism, being very conscious about where you're spending and who you're spending with, but also then it helps business then ratify and substantiate their investment in that, and then do more to improve.
Around the accreditation piece, how do you reconcile that with an online marketplace like Amazon that sells lots of different things? You can't really class it as a vegan company or as a carbon neutral company, because it literally does a whole, well, I'm sure literally kitchen sink. So how does that work?
Yeah, so basically we work with about 120 different accreditation certification partners, and different businesses will be accredited for different things. So in the case of Amazon, for example, I'm not sure about Amazon specifically, but they could, for example, be badged with being carbon conscious or carbon neutral. So it really has to do with how they are accredited. That's the kind of the credibility that we bring from Co2 We don't judge and jury. All we do is we show which businesses are badged for what accreditations within a very simple framework for the user. So whether that's reducing waste or whether that's cruelty free or organic, it just shows the users then the businesses that are accredited. But then what we're also able to do is show the stories of those businesses in terms of what more that they are doing. So things that they're also trying to do. Certainly around carbon footprinting, there's a lot of discussion about businesses really trying to do more about showing what their carbon footprint is. And so we're able to help tell that story.
Just to rewind it a little bit, talked about getting user feedback in and determining kind of what buckets or tranches, let's say, you focus on. How did open banking data play into that? Were you able to kind of start to spot some trends initially and then go out and say, are we on the right track here? Or was it kind of direct approach to users and just be like, talk to us?
So the business started off in New Zealand as a charity, and it was called Conscious Consumers. So it was all around just helping businesses understand. Kind of Ben, our founder, started off and he was going around badging vegan cafes, for example. I think the real power is not just what people are saying and wanting to do, but it's actually being able to show people the real-time impact of their spend. So there's one thing, carbon footprinting is a really good example. There are a lot of carbon footprint trackers out there that you are effectively surveyed. So you say, I took 3 flights last year, I promised to eat less meat, but actually it doesn't really show you the impact of all that you spend. So for example, you buy a TV license, so you pay your TV license, that has a carbon emissions attached. You go and buy a drink in your local pub, that has a carbon emissions. And it's all to do with the companies that you buy with, the businesses you buy with, and obviously how much you spend. So it's very powerful in terms of effectively what we say is like an ethical wallet. So you are really very conscious about everything you're spending.
Okay, that makes sense. So what have you kind of seen then, or have you, I should say, any shifts in your users and how they act? Right. I mean, you said you started off with 1% of, was it living wage spend? How's that impacted you? How have you gone on to change your spending habits, and what kind of trends are you seeing with consumers? What are the big buckets that people are focusing on?
Yeah, so for me personally, I think it's just that education piece. I think I was very naive, I think, to the real full impact of how few businesses are paying living wage. And then equally the businesses that are, and actually I've got a choice about the way I spend. When I look at my carbon footprint, I think fashion, how much I spend on fashion, probably not for me, but my kids more, it's quite startling. And there are so many businesses out there that I've able to discover both personally and obviously professionally. So businesses like Pangaea, who plant a mangrove tree for every item they sell. There's fashion rental businesses. There's a lot of other alternative ways rather than just buying fast fashion. And that's what's really exciting. In terms of consumers more generally, I think that general education around the way that they're starting to understand and interrogate their own spend data. They see their bank account and then all of a sudden they see it with kind of, for example, carbon emissions. And we see that users will go and spend a lot of time looking at different transactions and saying, God, I didn't know that, you know, with the TV license, I didn't realize that that had an impact. So there's definitely an education piece. It's still quite early days with us, so it's still kind of quite new, but there's the education is a big part for a lot of people.
As you're speaking, I'm kind of getting some parallels between like ethical spending and living and credit. And I wonder if we, just your thoughts on this, if we fast forward 10, 20 years, do you kind of see it that in the same way that if you apply for credit too many times, you have a bad credit history, there's certain places you can't spend money, there's certain ways you can and can't transact. Do you think that that will happen within ethics, where you try and buy from just a terrible fast fashion retailer and then that transaction is somehow blocked or more difficult to do because we've got all of this data circulating? What do you think about that?
I don't know if you get to the point of blocking. I do think people, there's a number of reasons why people consume. And obviously what we hope is that people start to put ethical living higher. We're seeing a younger generation who definitely care more about it. And I think it's something like 63% of consumers now are saying, according to an Accenture report, are saying that actually they do consider businesses' kind of ethical credentials as a key part of purchasing. That's really, really important. It's really interesting you talk about the credit rating, because when I joined the business, it felt like we could be the Experian of the kind of ethical world, where
I'm totally getting that vibe.
Yeah, and you know, kind of like your Uber rating is kind of quite a talking point for a lot of people, but the same for us. What we would love is kind of for people to start comparing their Co2 rating. So not necessarily about blocking behavior, but certainly being more aware, and actually people comparing and understanding their personal impact is so important.
In terms of your users, what demographics are showing up the most? Is it kind of more male or female heavy user base? Are there particular age bands showing up in the demographic data as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a younger generation, so Generation Z, more younger professionals. It's a little bit more skewed towards females, but it's not far off. It's pretty 50-50. And they tend to be people who aren't dark green. You'd expect people to kind of be very kind of already motivated. I think the people who are dark green are almost, they're already doing all the behaviors, so they kind of know what to do. It's the people who are less confident, who kind of say, look, I know I want to do something, but I really want to understand what I need to change and how my spend is impacting. So it's that education piece again.
I own a plant, so I must be good. Talk a little bit about kind of how you started the evolution, right? You talk about how do we start to scale. So what's next for you guys?
Well, there's a lot going on. Obviously, we have launched open banking in the UK back in November last year, and we're continuing to scale that. We've been testing our tech. Initially, we tested with living wage. We only a few weeks ago launched the carbon footprint tracker, which is real time. So we're testing the tech there. But we're getting some fantastic results, and we're scaling pretty quick. We'll be launching in New Zealand. We have just finished a fundraise, and it's really interesting because we are getting proactive approaches from other markets about going into different international markets, which we will obviously look to do. But obviously we want to evolve the product. So things like we're talking around is how we can evolve a plastics footprint. So you can not only see your carbon footprint, but also see a plastics footprint. And obviously a lot of this is dependent on what data's out there, and you're only ever as good as your data. But there's so much to do, so it's kind of, you know, constant discussion, but it's really exciting for us.
Going up the chain, getting a little conscious of time. Usually I ask about startups that you might want to shout out, and do a couple of ourselves. I think for anyone who's listening and wants to dive into the basics more, there's a book called Donut Economics, which personally I would very much recommend. It's kind of the balance between environment and social good, and how we can fit economics within the two. And then maybe an interesting one for you, Emma, but definitely a cool company is a company called Flux, who are doing kind of delving into your actual receipt to understand what you've spent individually. So a cool company there. But if you have any interesting startups or companies that you've seen, I know you've mentioned a couple as we spoke, Southpole being one just, that you want to shine some light on, that'd be great.
So we had a call a couple of weeks ago with this amazing business called Karma. And it's an app. You probably guys have spoken about them and know them. Have you spoken about them, Will?
I think so.
No, but do go for it.
Karma basically have an app. It originated in Sweden. They have a massive following in Sweden, and they've launched more recently in the UK, and they're scaling very quickly. But it's all to do with food surplus in restaurants. So they work with a load of leading restaurant chains. And at certain times you can download the app and you can see where restaurants have food surplus, and rather than throw it out, they offer it half price. So you can just go and pick it up. Obviously there's a benefit to the consumer because they get money off, but also it reduces waste, and it's just a really clever solution.
Yeah, so important. I won't name the fast food place, but I remember getting back into London from Paddington one evening, and I wanted to pick up some food. And I looked, there like these glass doors, and I looked in, and I was like knocking on the door saying I wanted to buy something. And they were like, no, we're closed. And then I mouthed to them like, what are you going to do with the food? And they just pointed to the bin.
Yeah.
And it was so painful because I was hungry, the food was there, but like they just had to throw it away, and it just didn't make any sense at all.
No, and what's clever about it is there's a whole business model there to be had. So, you know, obviously there's lots of other ways that they could use their food waste, as long as helping the homeless, you know, all the other things they could do. But there's also, it's just really clever how they're also turning it into a viable business model, which is often a big challenge, you know, for some, which is how actually can we do this, but in a commercially sustainable way. It's just a very clever solution.
That's a bit. Emma, thank you so much for joining us. Whereabouts can we find you?
Where can you find us?
Yes.
What, Co2 or the app?
Co2, the app, yourself, whatever.
Yeah, yourself.
So we are a remote first business. We are on the app, we're on LinkedIn. You can contact me. I'd love to hear. We're always looking for new users, for input. We're always looking for new ideas. And in fact, we have a very open business. So we often have some visitors to our weekly team meeting, which is across New Zealand and UK, where people come and just listen and observe because they really passionately care about what we're doing. So if you are really engaged and interested and have some great ideas or feel very motivated, always get in touch, because yeah, we love enthusiastic, engaged people who really understand and believe in this space.
That's awesome.
Great. Well, thank you again, Emma. I think we'll wrap it up there. Join us same time next week.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for inviting us here.
Cheers.
Thank you.